Good morning, everyone. It has been a while. This whole project is actually taking a little bit longer than I had expected, but that's all right. I was, however, just getting a little bit frustrated with hanging those cabinet doors. So I thought, you know what, I'm gonna stop and I'll share with you some of the progress that I've made since my last video. Now, in my last video, you saw me taking out the tiles of this room and leveling the floor, which was incredibly necessary because it was very sloped. And I also shared with you my plans for this gigantic built-in bookcase. Now, I think we left my last video off deciding on flooring. Very long story, very short. We really wanted real oak wooden floors. They are impossible to come by right now. And if you can get them, they are crazy expensive. So we went back to plan A, which was a cheap flooring covered by a big rug. So I went out and I looked at carpets as well as laminate flooring. Deciding between the two was actually a whole other process because I despise laminate flooring. I do not have a very good reason for this, except that I think it looks too perfect and too straight and too plasticky. I don't like it. But one day we will have our real wooden floors, and until then I will choose something that looks like wood and cover it with a big rug. So I spent about a day laying this flooring, and it wasn't very complicated, as many of you probably know, and I think it actually looks pretty good for a cheap wannabe wood option. I do still need to finish this little piece here along the wall and around the trapdoor to the cellar, but I was getting a little bit impatient and wanted to get started on building the built-in cabinets. So that's what I did. Now, I mentioned this when I explained the plan for this thing. This cabinet is going to hold our aquarium. And as those things weigh quite a lot, I am actually building a really big sturdy aquarium stand and building cabinetry around it, making it look like a real built-in unit. So I started by building the frame. I basically created 5 squares out of 44 by 69 millimeter pieces of wood that I connected with glue and screws. And then I attached those 5 square pieces to horizontal beams until it was one big frame, the width of the wall. Now, the horizontal beams that I used are actually 95 millimeters high, so they're higher than the ones that I used for those 5 squares, because that will give me more wood to nail the front pieces onto later, but you will see when we get there. The next day I went to the lumber place that I always go to, and I had them cut out all the pieces of MDF that I wanted for the insides of the cabinets. Now, I should have used plywood for this instead of MDF because it would have been cheaper and it would have been lighter, but I misread the price tag on the website and I don't want to talk about it. So I used my jigsaw to cut out little squares in the corners so that they would fit around the frame pieces that are on the inside. And then it really was just a big puzzle. I could just puzzle all the pieces inside because I had already had them cut to size. And then I secured all the pieces to the frame using my nail gun. The one that's coming from your mouth.
Don't mean to turn it upside down.
I also moved the wall socket that was on the wall to the side, and I made it go down and along the back of the cabinet so that it will come out on the inside of one of the middle cabinets, because that is where all the equipment for the aquarium is going to go. So it was very handy to have a wall socket there. Now I did reinforce the back of that cabinet with wood, because the MDF that I used for the back side is actually only 3 millimeters thick, and I wanted to make sure that I wouldn't push the whole thing out when I put a plug into the wall socket, so it's all sturdy enough to properly be used. So I cut out a hole for the wall socket thingy out of the back side of that cabinet, and then just installed the wall socket as you usually would. I finished the insides off by caulking all the corners and edges. I love caulking everything because it just gives it such a smooth finish, and it is so very satisfying. So moving on to the countertop of the cabinets, I wanted to use these boards. They are 38 millimeters high and 80 centimeters wide. 3 of them would make a countertop of 54 centimeters deep. But as usual, the wood was incredibly warped and cupped, and it was unacceptable. I really tried to force it flat, and I kind of thought it would work, but after I had finished one of these countertops, it would have been a problem putting the bookcases on it, and it may even have been a problem with the aquarium later on. So I didn't want to risk it, so I abandoned that plan and decided to go and look for a different solution. I calculated and cut exactly all the pieces that I would need for the fronts, and all I had to do was sand them really well so that they're all completely smooth. And it happened to be a really, really beautiful day. It was really warm for February as well, so I could do it outside, which was really, really nice. I started by attaching the bottom piece, which is 11 centimeters high, which is also why I wanted that wood in the frame higher, because then I could nail this in really easily. And then I laid out all the doors and middle pieces out in front of the cabinet just to check all the sizes, see if it all fit. And it did, so I nailed all the pieces onto the wood, laying the doors in the cabinets where they were actually going to go as a guide. And then I attached the top piece like I did the bottom piece. Okay, so here's the thing. When I designed this cabinet, when I made the plans for it, I thought it was more important for all the doors to be spaced out evenly throughout the width of the wall than it was for the doors to actually line up with the cabinets behind it. So I knew that there were going to be places where I had a little gap. On this side, right here, you can see that the front is aligned with the side of the cabinet, and that is actually the way that it's supposed to go. So that's also the way that the hinges work. You attach the hinge to the door and to the side here. But on all the other cabinets, except on exactly the opposite side right here where it also aligns, there is a little gap. There is a gap behind this front piece here. And so it would make it a little bit hard for me to attach a hinge. So I figured I would just have to make a little bit of a spacer. And then this happened. And I love it when something goes this well for me. Okay, a lot of things always go wrong, but this was just perfect. I have a couple of these scrap pieces that I cut from the frame that we made. And it fits in here exactly, like perfectly. That's a good way to start your day. But then on the other side, on this side, the gap is even bigger. So I put another one in here, and I grabbed another one, and 2 of them, it's exactly the thickness that we need on this side. So I don't know, but the cabinet gods are with me today. There's one more thing, because there's always another thing. I may have said this before, but these walls are incredibly wonky. So bad even that this side here, it creates a gigantic gap. So at the bottom it is fine. And then at the top there's a really big gap. So that the same happens on the other side. So I am going to cut new pieces for those sides, and I'm basically going to make sure that they are not straight so that they have this little slanted side to fill up that gap, because I want to be able to caulk that gap and make it completely seamless with the wall. So after I cut those side pieces again and I attached everything to the front of the cabinets, I filled out all the gaps and nail holes with wood filler and sanded it all completely smooth. I then attached all those spacer pieces for the door hinges and primed the entire front of the cabinet. Now for the cabinet doors, I wanted to do inset doors with the classic picture frame molding look. So I cut the picture frame molding with my miter saw to 45-degree angles and glued it onto the doors. This little metal thing that I'm using is actually a seam gauge that I use for sewing, but I used it to check if everything was exactly centered. Now for this particular job, I should have gotten a saw blade with many more teeth than I have now. It would have made cleaner cuts. So right now, not all the picture frame molding turned out perfectly, but I managed to hide most of the imperfections with a little bit of caulk, which I would have used to hide the seams anyway. Now I had a vague idea of what I want for this room. Like I wanted it moody and darker than the rest of the house. As I have mentioned in other videos, it is always a good idea to get paint samples. If you want to decide what color is going to go on your wall, don't go off of the little paint chip. Actually get the color and paint it onto your walls. Especially if you're going to do multiple walls, because every wall is going to look different. I had 2 different grays and 1 green. Now I ended up choosing the lighter of the 2 grays, which is the middle color here, knowing that if you're gonna paint an entire wall a relatively dark color, and in this case actually 2 walls because the cabinet's going to be the same color, it is always going to turn out a lot darker than the little bit that you painted. In fact, when I was done, I was still a little bit shocked at how dark it was, but I did want to go for a dark, moody vibe, so I think it'll be fine. So after painting the walls and the cabinets and all the cabinet doors, it was time to hang the doors. I did not film hanging the doors because by the time I got started, I was already so frustrated with it. I had hit my head multiple times to the tops of the cabinets. My drill bit kept getting stuck on screws and falling out of my drill. The door kept falling over because I missed a set of hands, so it was incredibly frustrating. So I decided to ask S to help me out, and we actually hung the doors in the evening. And that brought us to the situation that we're in now, because pretty much each cabinet has a door with a problem. So this door has a gap on the side that is too big, so they won't close, so I have to fix that. The second one has the same problem, but on the other side. The third one has a door that is just completely warped. I will have to build a new door for that one. And then the one in the back kind of has that too, but I don't think it's bad enough to actually build a new door. I don't know yet. So stay tuned for my next video to see if I can fix that door problem. And also, I do plan to actually finish the entire cabinet in my next video. So I will see you then.